Welcome to my channel, the Sinister Empires. Here, we uncover the dark machinery behind history's most powerful regimes, the hidden motives, the untold suffering, and the empires that shape the world through fear, dominance, and ambition. Prologue. The price of a kingdom hook. The desert wind carried the scent of incense and fear. One signature on a treaty, and a princess's destiny was erased. She wasn't just a hostage. She was a message, written in royal blood and silks, to every kingdom that dared defy the Sultan. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? The year of our Lord 1275. The kingdom of Makuria, a Christian bastion on the Nile for 7 centuries, was holding its breath. The news from the north was a creeping shadow. Sultan Baybar's Al-Bunduktari, the Panther of Cairo, had turned his terrifying gaze south. He had already shattered the Mongols at Ain Jalut and humbled the Crusader states. The Armenian kingdom of Cilicia lay broken, its prince sending his own daughters as tribute. Now, the Mamluk war machine, an empire built and run by slave soldiers, demanded the ancient-backed treaty be renewed, not as a pact between relative equals, but as a decree from master to a vassal in the frescoed halls of the Dongola Palace. King David of Makuria faced an impossible calculation. His armies, the famed Nubian archers, were formidable in defense of their rugged land. But could they withstand the full, concentrated fury of the Mamluk armies, veterans of the world's most brutal battlefields? The deserts would bleed his people dry before a single Mamluk lance was broken. The ambassadors from Cairo stood before him, not pleading but presenting terms. The tribute in gold and slaves was increased 5-fold, and there was a new, very specific clause. They request a gesture of goodwill, the translator said, his voice neutral, a symbol to cement this new era of peace. A princess of the royal house, to be honored with a place in the Sultan's own household in Cairo. The heir left the room. King David's eyes met those of his daughter, Tamar. She was 17, her beauty marked by the traditional royal tattoos on her hands, her mind sharpened by tutors in Coptic, Greek, and the scriptures. She was a prize, a living embodiment of Makuria's legitimacy and ancient lineage. To give her away was not just a personal tragedy. It was symbolic surrender that would echo through every village and church in the kingdom. Tamar stood frozen, the geometric patterns on the walls seeming to swim before her eyes. She saw the agony in her mother's silent tears, the grim resignation on her father's face. The kingdom or his daughter, the survival of a nation against the freedom of one soul. He dipped the quill. The scratch of ink on parchment was the loudest sound she had ever heard. She was no longer Princess Tamar of Makuria. She was a line item in a treaty, a human tribute. The journey north was a slow death. The familiar landscape of red cliffs and lush riverbanks gave way to the endless, intimidating expanse of the desert, and finally, to the overwhelming, noisy, foreign chaos of Cairo and the stark, imposing citadel that crowned it. This was no longer a journey. It was a processing. She was being catalogued, entered into the inventory of the most powerful man in the region. The first lesson was the hardest. Her luxury was a weapon. In a cage of silk and marble, her every comfort was designed to break her will, and her first task was to betray her own brother with a pen. The chambers assigned to her were not a dungeon. They were a masterpiece of opulence. Light filtered through intricate mashrabiyah screens, painting dancing geometric patterns on Persian carpets, so thick they swallowed sound. The air was cool, circulated by slave-operated fans, and fragrant with sandalwood. Low divans were heaped with cushions of Damascus silk. It was a world away from the sturdy, beautiful mud-brick palaces of Dongola. This, she quickly understood, was the first and most insidious layer of her captivity. How could she mourn when surrounded by such splendor? How could she claim to be a prisoner when she lived in a paradise most of her people could not even conceive of? Her guide was Saif al-Din, the chief eunuch, a man of immense power and impenetrable calm. He was the chief administrator of this gilded prison. "You are Despina now," he said on her first day, using a generic title for a foreign Christian woman. Tamar is a name for a Nubian princess. That life is over. Here, you will learn a new one. The education began with brutal efficiency. A stern woman named Fatima, who had been captured from a Greek noble family years earlier, was her instructress. The first rule was language. Nubian is a language of slaves and traders here, Fatima stated. Coptic is a language of a defeated church. You will speak only Arabic. Your tongue must forget its old shapes. The isolation was immediate and profound. Tamar's thoughts, her prayers, her silent screams, all began to fall to the new, harsh syllables of Arabic. It was a psychological occupation. Next came the bodily disciplines. The hammam was not for leisure. It was a site of ritualized purification. Stripped and scrubbed by silent, efficient hands, anointed with oils, she felt her physical self being systematically alienated from her. Her body was being prepared as an offering, its maintenance a matter of state protocol. The Sultan owns your service in all its forms. Fatima explained dispassionately. Your comfort is his privilege to grant. Your discomfort is to ignore. The summons, when it came, followed the pattern she had been drilled in. The walk to Baybar's private quarters was a procession to a fortress of power. The walls were lined with Mamluk guards, their faces as still as stone, their very presence a reminder of the military machine that underpinned the luxury. The Sultan's room was a reflection of the man, part scholar, part warrior. Scrolls of poetry lay beside maps of military campaigns. He assessed her not with lust, but with a cold, analytical gaze. Your father was pragmatic, he said, his voice a low rumble. He saved his people from the fire I brought to the Armenians. You are the proof of his wisdom. He then gestured to a writing set. Your brother, Simon, will need similar wisdom. You will write to him. Tell him of the honor shown to you. Encourage his loyalty. The command was a masterstroke of psychological control. She was being forced to become an agent of her own people's pacification. Her words, carefully censored, would be used to demonstrate the completeness of Makuria's submission. To refuse was unthinkable. The fate of the servant who had whispered to her was a silent warning. To comply was betrayal that would haunt her forever. She took the pen. As she formed the elegant Arabic script, to my esteemed brother, I live in comfort and security. The Sultan's generosity is boundless. Her mind screamed in silent rebellion. In the flourish of a letter, she tried to mimic the shape of a Nubian cross. In the spacing of the words, she had the rhythm of a prayer from the liturgy of St. Mark. It was a futile, desperate act, a message in a bottle she knew would never reach shore. But in that moment, etching her defiance into the very instrument of her subjugation, the Princess of Makuria drew her first silent line in the sand. Part 2. The Empire of Slaves and the Psychology of the Harem. Hook. The Mamluks were unique, an empire ruled by men who were themselves purchased as property. They had perfected the science of remaking human identity, and the Sultan's harem was their most refined laboratory. To understand a machine that held Tamar, one must look at its blueprint. The Mamluk Sultanate was a political paradox. Its name came from the Arabic word Mamluk, meaning owned. The ruling class was composed of slave soldiers, primarily Kipchak Turks from the Eurasian steppes, purchased as boys, converted to Islam, and trained in a ruthless military academy known as the Tablakhana. They were taught that their only loyalty was to their master and their Mamluk household. Their pasts were systematically erased. Baybars himself had arrived this way, a boy from the steppes transformed into a sultan. This system produced a ruling elite with no tribal or familial ties to the population they ruled, ensuring their power was absolute but also making them experts in the art of identity dissolution. The imperial harem was a feminine parallel to this process. It was not a place of debauchery, but a highly structured political and administrative institution. Its functions were multifaceted. Domestic, managing the Sultan's household and family. Political, serving as a living museum of conquests, with women from every defeated kingdom. Diplomatic, hostages like Tamar ensured compliance of their home regions. Reproductive, producing heirs who would be raised as loyal Mamluks, often with more loyalty to the state than to their maternal ancestry. Tamar was integrated into this complex hierarchy. At the top was the Sultana mother. Below her were the Cadans, recognized wives who had borne sons. Then came the Iqbals, favored concubines. And at the base were the Gediklis, ordinary concubines, and the vast staff of servants. Status dictated everything. Quality of quarters, clothing, food, and access to the outside world. It was in this snake pit of ambition and survival that Tamar found an unlikely ally, Theophana of Trebizond, a Byzantine princess given as a political gift a decade earlier. Theophana's beauty had faded, replaced by a weary cynicism. She found Tamar one day, staring blankly at a courtyard fountain. "They make you write the letter, yes?" Theophana asked in fluent Arabic. When Tamar nodded, mutely, Theophana gave a bitter smile. "Of course. I wrote one too. My father called it a strategic alliance. My brother called it saving our people. I call it the price of my life. We are living, breathing receipts, proof of payment rendered. Does it get easier?" Tamar whispered, the question of vulnerability she could not afford with anyone else. "No," Theophana said, her gaze distant. "But you get stronger. You learn to build a fortress inside your own mind. In there, you are still a princess. In there, you speak your own language. In there, you are free. Out here, you perform. You become what they want you to be. The performance is your armor." This advice became Tamar's survival strategy. She perfected the art of dissociation. During the Sultan's summons, she would retreat to her internal fortress, her mind replaying memories of running through the date groves of Dongola with her brother, or the sound of cathedral's great brass bell calling the faithful to prayer. The body that lay beside Babar's was Despina's. The soul inside was still Tamar's. She also learned to navigate the harem's politics with calculated caution. The current favorite was a fiery Circassian named Ghazala, who saw every new young woman as a threat. Tamar made a conscious choice to appear unthreatening. She did not seek the spotlight. She observed it. She demonstrated competence without ambition, helping to manage the harem's complex schedules and inventories. She made herself useful to Saif al-Din, becoming a reliable, quiet cog in the machine. Invisibility, she discovered, was a potent form of safety. She was learning that in a system designed to crush individuality, the smallest act of self-preservation was a revolutionary act. The Sultan's shadow and a rebellion of thread. Hook. When the panther died, the chains did not break. They simply tightened around a new master's wrist. But in the silence of obscurity, Tamar discovered that the most powerful rebellions are not fought with swords, but woven with thread. In 1277, a shockwave rippled through the Islamic world. Sultan Baybars was dead. The official story was a poison cup intended for another, but the rumors swirled of internal plots. The citadel, a monument to his iron will, suddenly felt fragile. The Mamluk emirs, the great lords of the regime, eyed each other with naked suspicion. The struggle for succession was a brutal, bloody affair fought in palace corridors and on Damascus streets. In the harem, panic was a palpable force. Women wept, fearing being cast out or worse, becoming spoils of victorious faction. For a heart-stopping moment, Tamar allowed herself to hope. With the architect of her captivity gone, could the structure collapse? Could a treaty signed with a dead man be void? She imagined the long journey south, the sight of the Dongola citadel on the horizon. The reality was a colder, crueler lesson. The Mamluk system was institutional, not personal. The bureaucracy, the treasury, the army's command structure, all continued to operate. The harem was a state asset, part of the imperial patrimony. When Baraka Khan, one of Baybar's sons, finally secured the throne, he simply inherited his father's household. An administrator came with a ledger, checked her name, and moved on. She had been transferred like a piece of furniture. The hope that had briefly flickered within her guttered and died, leaving a colder, harder substance in its place. Resolve. With the new sultan preoccupied with consolidating his power, his interest in his father's older concubines waned. Tamar's summons ceased entirely. She was moved to a smaller, quieter apartment on the harem's periphery. For many, this was a sentence to a slow, forgotten death. For Tamar, it was an unexpected liberation. This obscurity granted her a sliver of something she had not possessed since leaving Makuria: agency. She turned her attention to the harem's extensive textile workshops. With Saif al-Din's permission, granted because she was efficient and caused no trouble, she took over their management. She oversaw the accounts, the purchasing of silk and dye stuffs, the work of the weavers and embroiderers. It was here that she launched her silent war. She began, subtly at first, to introduce Nubian aesthetic codes into the designs. A border pattern that echoed the friezes on the temples of Musaweret Yesufra, a complex diamond motif, inspired by the weaving of Nubian baskets, was incorporated into a cloak for a Mamluk lady. She sought out specific minerals and plants to create dyes, a deep, resonant indigo that mirrored a Nile of twilight, a specific ochre that matched the cliffs of her homeland. The Mamluk elite, always hungry for novelty and displays of cosmopolitan taste, adored these new exotic designs. They had no idea that the fabrics they wore so proudly were embedded with the cultural DNA of a kingdom they held in submission. This was Tamar's rebellion. It was not loud or dramatic. It would never be recorded in any chronicle. But as she oversaw the creation of a magnificent tapestry for the Sultan's reception hall, she ensured its central medallion was surrounded by a band of Nubian geometric patterns. Every foreign ambassador, every Mamluk emir who stood in that hall was, unbeknownst to them, paying homage to the enduring spirit of Makuria. She had found a way to inscribe her identity onto the very heart of the empire. She was no longer just a victim. She was a saboteur of memory, ensuring that a part of her world would endure, woven into the fabric of this foreign power. The unmarked grave and the unbroken thread. Hook. She died far from home, buried under a foreign name. But the story of Princess Tamar is not one of defeat. It is a chilling blueprint of how empires operate, and a timeless testament to the human spirit's refusal to be erased. Tamar of Makuria, once a princess, then Despina the concubine, died in the citadel of Cairo around the turn of the century. She likely succumbed to one of the fevers that occasionally swept through the city. There was no state funeral. She was buried according to Muslim rite in an unmarked grave, her Christian name forgotten by her captors. In the vast, meticulous records of the Mamluk Sultanate, her passing was a minor administrative note. In Makuria, her brother King Simon ruled as a vassal, forever balancing the demand of Cairo with the needs of his people. The chronicles of the kingdom, written in Coptic, recorded her fate with sorrowful brevity. The Lady Tamar was taken to Cairo, and there she remained. They could not record her silent struggles, her coded letters, or her woven rebellions. Yet, her life stands as a profound historical testimony. The Mamluk system that consumed her was a masterpiece of political engineering, a forerunner to the Ottoman systems that would follow. It demonstrated how power could be maintained not just through fear, but through sophisticated processes of assimilation, where luxury was a tool and identity was a battlefield. The use of high-status women as hostages was a calculated strategy to demoralize conquered elites and make submission palatable. Tamar's story forces us to look beyond the simplistic narratives of victors and vanquished. It reveals the gritty reality of survival under empire, the psychological fragmentation, the moral compromises, the microscopic act of defiance that constitute victory when all other forms are impossible. Her rebellion was not an open refusal, which would have been fatal and futile, but in the stubborn, creative preservation of her essence. She proved that even when the body is captive and the tongue is silenced, the human can find a way to assert itself, to leave a mark, however faint, on the pages of history. The patterns she wove into those Mamluk silks have long since turned to dust. But the pattern of her resistance, the refusal to be completely broken, the insistence on maintaining a hidden self, is a thread that connects her to all those who have endured systematic oppression. She is a reminder that empires, for all their terrifying power, can never fully capture the human spirit. The story of Princess Tamar is not just a tale from the 13th century. It is a mirror reflecting the timeless struggles of identity, power, and the quiet, unyielding strength of those who are determined to endure. As this episode closes, I want to hear from you. What did you think? What should we explore next? Your suggestions and feedback shape upcoming stories on the Sinister Empires.